Now we want to reinforce a clarity, bring us back to the understanding that legal is not the same as what is natural. So your natural, God-given Christian name is opposite to what is legal. The two are not the same. In fact, your God-given Christian name is distinguished and separated from the legal or surname, or basically differentiated from it. So it's not one and the same, though you can try to put the two together, but it's not really the case. So when we look at hearsay, I would tell people that if I was ever, brought to the court, not by my own, basically consent, I would be obligated to speak the truth, and because all the world of what we call mankind and womankind were purchased by Jesus Christ, according to the Scripture, and that all legal debt was canceled by his execution, according to the will of God. All debt was gone. So therefore, anything that would be involved with legal, especially a surname meaning a debtor, is completely contrary to that concept of truth, because it would be saying that it still exists, that there still is debt. So we would understand that secular nations would promote the concept of legal debt existing still, because they're not spiritual. So if I was in that courtroom, of course, one of the first things I'd be saying is, I'm here involuntarily against my consent. And I place the burden of proof upon the prosecutor and the accuser, which would have been possibly an officer of the law, that I have any legal entitlement to use the legal state surname. And because there is no proof there, they're relying on you removing that burden of proof by stating that endorsement or that approval or affirmation for that name, because he who affirms must prove. But because you don't have proof, you have to pay. Because you don't have proof, it's not yours. So we take it back a little step. So I would also be stating that you can't court me, because they're trying to court you in there, and you can't date me, because I've already been spoken for by Jesus Christ. So no courting and dating to a Christian, because a Christian operates in truth, not in fiction. Now, when we go to, I'll give you just a further, scenario. I'll just give you just basically a dialogue of what would happen in a court of law. Is the name that appears on the docket nothing more than hearsay? Of course. It's based on it. It's based on a document that started it off as hearsay. So, of course, the court, the judge, and the prosecution would want you to state your name for the record. So they'd say, please state your name for the record. And you, basically being in the position of being a defendant in that matter, would say, objection, Your Honor, calls for hearsay. The court, of course, would excuse me. No, I'd say, excuse me, because I'm excused out of this. I'm already pardoned. I'm not part of hearsay, I'm part of truth. So defense could possibly go further in the conversation or dialogue and say, I know this is unusual, Judge, but think about it. An individual or a person typically doesn't name him or herself. They are told their name outside of court by their parents. Now that question asks the witness to repeat in court what they've been told out of court to prove the truth of the matter asserted. That's black letter hearsay. So we'll leave it at that. I want you to digest that, because that's a really, really simple understanding of what's going on. The Roman Catholic Church is running the system of legal. They're there to make a worldwide collection plate. They do it through, in Canada, the SIN program. They register you into SIN once you've taken them off of the responsibility of the bond that they signed. It's hearsay. The best they can do is leave it ambiguous and unclear, because they can't really put given name and surname on the main instrument that they're using, or the version of the name that shows up on the docket, because they're trespassing on the property of God. And therefore they leave it unclear in a manner that is just based on a hearsay. And then you walk in and plead guilty to hearsay. by your own voluntary behavior. Equity or good conscience will not support a volunteer. Because if you're volunteering to do the very thing that's harming you, you can't call out for relief. And so we know that there's many people that are that would that seem to have this shadow boxing. I'm going to get that system back. You leave that up to God. The truth that you speak will handle it because you're dealing with the power of God. You're dealing with His power, His life force, and therefore it speaks through you in that moment. You do not need to worry about the power of the devil anymore because they're obligated to handle their own problem. Because this didn't occur by you as a child, this has occurred by a hearsay document, and then an ambiguous document that was basically handed out. They have received what is theirs. They basically had the name given to them, the surname, so they have it in full. It's theirs. They said they're satisfied to the correctness and sufficiency, but I can take that down a spiritual level and a legal level. They've legally been satisfied, so they don't need anything more. They've got it. End of story. It's theirs. It's been returned to them. It's in their hands. They've seized it. By the fact that the given name was in there, it canceled out that debt anyways, and therefore it's paid in full. There is no debt required, and therefore they've signed to that execution, and therefore it's done. It's finished, as Jesus said. It is finished. He was made sin for us, so even in the sense it looks like there's a crossover into a debtor system. The child had nothing to do with it because the fact is that a child is innocent. Therefore, they could never, bring a judgment, as they didn't have really the authority, in a sense, to go down a fictitious trial of Jesus, because it was all based on hearsay down a direction that was stating that he was committing a physical or basically creating a de facto attack on the Roman Empire at the time, and being accused that he was doing something seditious against the power of Caesar, which he wasn't. He clearly stated that his kingdom was not of the world, the temporal world, it was spiritual. And therefore your God-given name is spiritual territory. It has nothing to do with the state. The state has no authority over a spiritual name, but they certainly have authority over someone who will negate that power that they have in truth and walk in and speak a fiction and a lie. So the minute you've walked into the lie, you're walking into the liar's den of evil, and therefore they now bear a sword for doing one of the worst things you could do in the world of God, which is lie. God hates a liar because of what Satan has done, and he has induced mankind through nothing more than a legal lying spell. The whole world is under a spell. An hallucination that something which is false is true, therefore nothing more than a falsehood over you. That's all it is. It's a false covering. It's not truth. So we want to be very careful to realize that when you participate in that, your consent is saying, that's who I am. And when you've said that you are legal, then you've walked into the jurisdiction of that situation. So certainly, I would not be recommending people to go to court, because of the very fact is that you would be energizing that. If you do, you better be very careful in what you say and why you're there. And it would take a little bit of, I say, good spiritual prayer to know what to say in that moment, because you're kind of walking in voluntarily, and they will expect that you would most likely be the one that is on the docket. So, the bond was already given anyway, so the fraud is already under the certificate that was issued. That's the only thing that really needs to be inside that courtroom, because it's already been executed, so the bond is done. Therefore, you don't have any legal money, and this party is signed to the fact that they've taken the responsibility. The blood money is on them. So, unfortunately, walking in, it becomes a position of, why are you there? Who are you? Are you acting as the surety? Are you endorsing this? Are you willing to take the hit? You said you can earn your own salvation. Well, that's certainly contrary to what the reality is. So anyways, we'll leave this video at that, and I hope this has helped again, and we'll go on to the next.